Welcome to Break Free from Corporate, the only podcast dedicated to bringing you business success secrets from leading entrepreneurs with one thing in common. They left the corporate world, became their own boss, and are now living incredible lives. To access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.
Welcome everyone. This is Gavin Sequeira from Break Free from Corporate, and excited to bring you another fantastic guest to talk to today on our podcast. His name is Anfernee, and Anfernee is someone I've known for a few years, although really we've only started to touch base more recently and finding out all the great work that he's doing. Now, Anfernee is someone who has been in the trenches, guys. He's done time in corporate. He had quite an extensive career working in call centers and companies like HP, and he did lots of roles within there. He's a sales consultant. He's worked in project management. So he's done quite a variety of different roles in there. Obviously, something turned around for him, and he's gone on an entrepreneurial journey, and he's going to talk to us about that today. But I'm really excited to have Anfernee on the show. So Anfernee, if you're there, welcome to the program.
Yep, definitely here. Thanks for inviting me, Gavin.
No worries at all. Excellent. So, Anfernee, tell us, a little bit about your journey. How, firstly, what were some of the things you were doing, and why did you decide, or how did you decide to make that switch to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so why don't we start off at like what I studied in university, because that would then kind of paint the picture, I suppose.
Yeah.
I went to University of Western Sydney here in Sydney, or Campbelltown, for those who know the area. And studied I started off at University of Sydney studying a dual degree, which was a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science. I lasted 1 year, and then I didn't like the vibe of the place, and I was very lonely. I went from a small school of 200 students to this massive university experience with thousands of students. My best buddy went to the same university, but he left within the year, and so I found it very hard to adapt, to be honest. And then I also felt I was in the wrong place because I came from the western suburbs, and I was in this place where, if we go back to that time, that's when Nokia had just launched a mobile phone, and Ericsson was out there, and we were on these devices, but I wasn't, because I came from a low economic area. My parents they weren't of that. They didn't have those luxuries. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then I was hanging out with these students who came from the North Shore, and they had their own cars and nice cars and all these things that I'm going, oh my gosh, like, who are these people?
Well, isn't it? It's a completely different lifestyle environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and now I'm not to say I didn't resonate or connect with some of those people, and I did. I made some really good friends, but for the most part, I felt like a fish in the wrong ocean.
Yeah.
And so within that year, a good friend of mine said, look, you're not enjoying that experience. You might as well just go to find a better university or a better environment where you can actually thrive and do well.
Yeah.
And so, I went to University of Western Sydney in Macarthur. I studied IT. So I took on it's a Bachelor of Business, specializing it became programming, and then did 4 years there and graduated with one of the best results in my class.
Right.
And just made some lifelong friendships. Like those guys, we played basketball together, and now we still are in communication. The year I graduated was the year the .com had just busted. So for those who remember it, big crazy energy, everything was exciting, people were investing all these stocks and things, and then the year later everything crashed.
I do remember that well.
Yeah, and here I am coming out with an IT degree going, I'm going to get this IT job, and for 18 months I struggled to find any work.
Right.
I went through around 30 interviews, put out hundreds of applications, and then ended up in the first gig that I got was working for the internet service provider. What were they called? The name escapes me. Purple and yellow logo. Dodo. That's so long ago. I don't remember the name of the company.
Are they still around?
Yeah, they're still around. They're like one of the. Oh, now well, sorry, not they were Dodo, and then I went to TBG. So TBG is the company I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're definitely still around, right? They're one of the
Yes.
biggest, if you will, now in Australia. And did 3 months there in call center. That was the first job I could do, customer service, and then ended up. Whilst I was going through and then I had some time whilst I was studying. I worked for American Express in their call center, doing just consumer lending.
Sure.
And credit card services. And so I had this experience of just providing support over the phone. Long story short, I ended up, when I graduated, 18 months later, I ended up working for HP.
Right.
In their customer support center here in Sydney, in Rhodes. And within a year, I moved from being a call center operator to becoming the team leader of that team. Or actually, it was a new team that they were bringing in.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from being a contributor to being a manager of 10 staff from that team. And then within the following year, globalization had hit, and HP decided to offshore that Sydney office, most of it, to India.
Oh no! So there goes that career path.
Yeah, so I had the unfortunate and fortunate experience of having to essentially make redundant, essentially fire the people that were working under me, and then having to go. They gave me the opportunity of finding another role within the company, or moving on to a project manager role and a trainer role, which meant going over to India for a few months and training the new team that were replacing my team in Sydney.
That would have been really quite. On one hand, obviously it's an experience, so you'd be excited by that, but you also would have had a bit of mixed reservations as well, right? Because you just had to let go of staff, and now you're going over to kind of replace them. But yeah, it's tough, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that, whilst you're going through it, it's just you're in the throes of the event, and everything is, there's deadlines, things need to happen now, and you don't really understand the human emotions at work. Like I had, just recalling a tough conversation I had with one of my team members who became a great mate. Like, we had to work together for 2 years, and here I was saying, mate, like, we have to let you go, and and he by all measures, he was doing a good job. Like, he wasn't because he was doing a terrible job. And he went off and he's fine, but at the time that was terrible. And then I had to go over to India, and here I am putting on a brave face and going, hey everyone, and you're the new team, and let's get you up and running.
Yes.
And then realizing they were, being that they were a support team, getting calls from Australian customers and clients and New Zealand customers, they copped a lot of essentially a beating, because it was like, we were getting all these complaints, right? It was like, oh, they don't speak our language, then all these things, they're reading scripts, and I'm going, I'm seeing both ends of the spectrum. Like, I get it as a customer, that would probably frustrate me. On the other side of it, I see that what's happening with the staff over there, and they're dealing with anxiety and stress, and they're trying to do a good job and just make wages so they can pay for their families and all these things. So I start to build a real empathy around the stresses involved in the system, right? And I also started to see the way the company navigated change management, and how they try to, they were like bringing in these programs right before we let go of our team members, to try and prepare people for their jobs being taken away, and there were good efforts. I feel in some areas it fell flat, but it helped me prepare to understand the role the leaders play in, leading the vision, and also working with the humans involved in deploying that vision. And when things go wrong, right, like this year with the pandemic, and even with the clients I've been working with this year, that particular client lost some clients, which meant that impacted my ability to work. And I shared this with you in a past conversation. And so I always, again, had the experience of, when you really know, I suppose, the values and the values of an organization or the leadership in times of duress, more so than you do in the good times, right? When everything is great. everything's a party. We're all having fun.
That's right.
But when things go wrong,
that's when you really see the true colors. And you bring up a really good point. I don't want to stop you mid story, but people who would be listening to this would really identify with what you're saying, Anfernee, because it's one thing to say, I worked in corporate, I worked for this large organization, everything was good or bad or whatever, but there's all this underlying stuff, the underlying themes that sometimes people don't see. When management suddenly make a decision at the top and hundreds of people are let go or thousands of people are let go, like how are these decisions then impacting people's lives? But it's not just the people that are let go, it's the managers who have to then tell their staff, look, I'm really sorry, but we have to let you go. They have to deal with the emotional stress. And then in your case, not only did you have to do that, but then you had to put on a brave face the next day in another country, hire people who then are going to be going through a different kind of stress, dealing with, all of this stuff. So, man, you really were in a tough situation. I can feel.
Yeah, and it's in hindsight, I reflected over that experience recently, and what I realized was just how much we were numbing the pain, the emotional pain and the mental health issues. I mean, mental health has become a big focus this year, as I'm sure you're aware.
Okay.
But certainly during that time, my colleagues, our managers, there were things going on, like people's relationships were falling apart.
Yeah.
Medically, they were having issues. People were, boozing up, spending weekends in bars, drinking up, and that became the culture. It was very toxic.
Yeah.
Now that I view it that way. But at the time, that's how we knew how to deal with the pain. Like, what do you do? There's no therapy, there's no counselling, and that's almost it's a stigma. Like you don't. It's not a cool thing to go out there and go, hey, I'm really struggling with this, and that's a part. I would imagine. I haven't been back to HP, and I'm not going to say they're the only company that has an issue. I actually think it's. I've heard this even with my mates that work for other corporates. They've had similar experiences where it's like, okay, and they've seen their own leadership. If you go up to the higher levels, to the senior managers and the directors, they're having challenges with just maintaining the stress and managing that well.
I work for large companies. I mean, this is not a reflection of any one company, but I work for large corporates which have their headquarters in the US, and some there you've got a boardroom with people in suits making decisions that are impacting people all around the world, and I'm talking about their employees, not even their staff. So and their suppliers and all of that, and they're sitting down and they're going, well, we can cut this budget and that'll save us tens of millions of dollars, and we move these people here to that. So they're making these decisions at a very, very high level, sitting in their plush offices and all of that. And where the rubber hits the road is like people like yourself, Anfernee, and people then in your team and people on the ground that are impacted, and even at a manager level, people have to deal with the stresses. And like when I was made redundant during the GFC back in 2007, I was let go with literally hundreds of people from my organization on the same day. But and now everyone takes it differently. Some people took it very personally because they'd been with that company for 22 years or 26 years or 18 years, and they were doing a great job. These guys were top performers, and they were let go, and they couldn't understand like how someone up in corporate could make a decision to let go of an entire division or merge another company. And I guess, the mental health side of it, the dealing with it on an emotional level, these weren't things that were talked about back then. I don't ever remember people talking about the stresses of these sort of things. And I mean, now it's become more of an issue, but now it's more people are raising it to the surface. But yeah, it's definitely something to I hear what you're saying. So
yeah, and it's a very good point you raised there. And I guess what COVID has shown us in the past, 12 months or 8 months, has really shown now companies are starting to see, the transition. They're moving away from, hey, we need to have everyone sitting in our office space here in a specific location. We can actually still maintain the same levels or similar levels of productivity while having people work from home, right? And not all companies, but for, I'm seeing top, like, tech companies, Twitter, and some of these other ones have Facebook have just gone, we're just going to go 90% remote now.
Yep.
Right. And what does that mean? That what they're saying is we're saving money on real estate. We don't have to pay for those leases.
That's right.
Right. Like, and so what it's done is we don't have to fire everybody. Like, we don't have to remove, 10,000s of staff, but we can actually say, well, you guys work from home. Now, the problem that I'm seeing coming up with that is also, are they considering, when people work from home, there's other distractions and there's other things they need to take into consideration. Like, your kids are there, your space where normally is your sanctuary, where you go and you de-stress and you're there to recover and refresh, is now also your office space is the room next door, right? And are you taking, like, mental health has become a major issue because we don't have the water cooler. Like, I can't meet Gavin, up in the cafeteria and we're going to have a chat about things, right? So now we're starting to see a hybrid model where companies are going out there and saying, okay, we're going to have this combination of, 3 days a week you're in the office, 2 days you're at home, or whatever it may be. They're playing around with different methodologies, but it's really interesting to see what's happening because of this current times.
No, definitely. And so walk us through. Obviously, like, this was like your background, in your corporate days and working life. And then at what point did you, or how did you then begin the transition to doing your own business, or what pushed you into that area, or how did you make that, that decision? Look, I'm either fed up or I'm going to do my own thing, or did it happen by accident? Like, what was the way that you got into business?
Yeah. So the final year that I was at the company, I ended up having a hospital. I got hospitalized. I had a brain surgery.
Oh, wow.
All the stress kind of compounded, and then it landed at this position where I ended up sitting at my computer. Like, I came into work one day, sat at my computer, opened up my desktop because I didn't have a laptop back then, and I just started to see, like, triple vision. Anything I was seeing on my screen, I was seeing 3 times of, right? And then my head was compounding. I said to my colleague next to me, I said, I asked her, I said, what does a migraine feel like? Because I've never had one. And she said, well, it feels like you're getting, smashed on the head with a baseball bat or something. And I said, well, that's what I'm feeling right now. Wow. And so she said, get to a doctor ASAP. Yeah. And I did. 5 weeks later, I'm in surgery in Liverpool Hospital, and they basically found a growth in the right temporal lobe of my brain, and said, we don't know what that is. It may or may not be cancerous, but we need to cut it out immediately. So that then led down the path of me evaluating where I was in my life and with my career. Did I want to proceed and go back to those 50, 60 hours a week that I was doing? Was it all worth the pay that I was getting? Was it, I also mentioned here that for the 4 years leading up to that point, I was making a good salary, but I had no social life. I had no relationship. I was just working.
Yeah.
Right. And then I kind of had the realization. I said, what was this all for? Okay, so it's just, we've got the shareholders in the company making their profits, and they're doing all their annual reviews, and the company's building profit on profit every year, and all great for them. How does that translate to my life, and how's that helping me and my family?
Yes.
And that's kind of, that was the impetus. So I basically went to my thankfully I had great managers and leaders, like direct leaders that worked with me, and they basically said, hey, during the time I was in hospital, that's when they decided to make the role redundant. So I would come back to no role, right? And so my manager at the time, he said, well, we're going to help you find another role within the organization. And I ended up landing negotiating my way to a project manager role in Toronto, Canada.
Wow.
And so, I ended up over there. They paid for my visa, which I'm very grateful for that experience. And then within 10 months of me moving over there, they basically said, where GFC is hit, we're removing, like what you said, 1,000 project managers, and you're one of them.
Man, this is like the worst scenario I can think of. I mean, firstly, you land in a hospital really due to, I don't know what might have caused that, your migraine and the thing that was growing inside of you, but stress had to have been a big part of it. And And man, it just shows, sometimes, look, corporate life and working life and all is great. Look, it is good. It's good for a lot of people, but sometimes you've got to ask yourself, is it the right environment for me? If you're listening to this right now, and some people can resonate. By the way, I've never had that happen to me, but I have actually interviewed, and I know a really good friend of mine in Sydney who, was doing very well in his career, and he fell down the stairs one day at work. He just had a brain aneurysm, and a lot of it was due to stress. And he was in a high pressured role, and that led him down the path of obviously hospitalization and all the stuff you're talking about. And then eventually he ended up becoming, starting his own business, and because he just could not go, he physically did not have the capacity to go back into that kind of lifestyle again. He just couldn't. So he had to find a better way. But gee, you don't want to have to be forced into a situation because your health deteriorates to that point. But it seems like you really took a beating, man. And then you went overseas, you tried to start a life there, and then you had the rug pulled under your feet.
Exactly right. It's just like one great turn after another.
But we know the story has a happy ending.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm with you. Like my what I do tell, relatives and young people who are going through school right now and they're thinking about their careers. I say just take what I've been through as a lesson and perhaps a warning, and then just really, I love what you're doing, Gav, because you're basically telling people through this podcast and what you do. Look, you do have a choice. You can choose your career, and you can choose the way you want to work and how you want to work and who you want to work with. And I'm 100% like I resonate with that message. So I ended up in Canada, 2009. I was let go in 2010, and now I had another year left on the visa, and I wasn't ready to come back to Australia. Like I was enjoying being over there and traveling and just experiencing a new reality, right? And so what I ended up doing was the reality, the situation was I wasn't great with money, and so I had about 6 months left of savings that I could utilize, and I said to my housemate at the time, I said, what can I do? Because I can't, my visa basically stipulates that I cannot go find employment with another organization because I was sponsored by HP to be over there, right? So
yeah, you had restrictions.
Now HP had restrictions, and one of HP's own policies, if you are made redundant, is you are not actually allowed to apply for another role for, I think, like 12 months. Yeah. So even if I wanted to work for the company, I still couldn't, right? So, which is a really strange policy, but anyway, so then and the other policy is you can't go work for a competitor.
No, I know these policies because I used to work for large tech companies, and when I was made redundant, same thing. You literally are shut out from the entire industry. It's which doesn't make any sense at all, because if that's your trade and that's your background and that's your skill set, through no fault of your own, by being made redundant, you're literally excluded from finding another job in your industry. So you got guys that are then working in supermarkets pushing trolleys. You got guys driving cabs that are used to be senior managers in big companies, but they for a period of time they can't find employment. I mean,
that's right.
Anyway.
It's what we do as humans is just sometimes incredible. And so essentially my housemate said, look, you've been volunteering, teaching salsa on the weekends at this church, every weekend for the last 3 months. Why don't you just do that in our living room? And I said, oh, really? Can I do that? And she said, yeah, just, we'll clear out all the furniture, we'll move it into the kitchen, and you can just run some classes. And so I found this site at the time. It was called meetup.com. It is still around now, but those were the early days in 2009, 2010. And I put down, I created a group or a meetup, and I called it, was it Toronto Beginner Salsa or something like this? Mm. And within 2 weeks, I had 200 members. And then I put down my first event, and I said, look, just come along to this address. Of course, I didn't tell them it was my house. And then they came, and I put my hat out, and they put some cash into my hat, and I teach them salsa for an hour. And that became the first, what we call a side hustle now. But,
yes.
Back then it's just making money, right? Yeah. And so I did that for a good 12 months. And during that time, a couple of my students actually said, "Can you come and do this for our company at our office?" And so I did that, and essentially was doing that every Thursday for a couple of hours at different organizations. And whilst I was doing the salsa thing, which was more of a hobby thing, and making some decent cash just to pay the rent and things, but I was also volunteering for a non-profit, learning all about social media marketing. Right. So at the time, that's how I kind of cut my teeth in Twitter and Facebook, and learning how to really build an audience, how to engage and communicate through those mediums. Going from, and also I was also blogging from 2009. I started my own personal blog, and just wrote every day, just ideas, things that I was going through at the time, things that were inspiring me. Anything that I was learning and thinking about, I would blog about.
That's awesome.
And and that started to build an audience as well over time, and that all culminated in this one eventful meeting when I went along to a cruise. It was like a harbour cruise experience in Toronto. One of my colleagues at the social enterprise, she couldn't make it. It was actually her ticket, and she said, "Oh, Anf, do you want to go along? I can't make this thing." And now you have to understand, I want to frame for people listening to this, that I was not as bold as I am now back then. Back then I was very much introverted. Even though I was managing teams and things like this, I was still preferred to, I'd rather be the guy, serving drinks at the bar, or maybe not even that, behind the scenes, and not in the middle room talking to people, right?
Yeah, got it.
And so I went to this cruise, completely nervous, had no idea what I was going to do. And the first guy that I actually struck up the courage to talk to was the guy who was doing the AV, the audio setup on the boat. And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And he said, I'm just doing this as a favor for a mate, but my real gig is I run a web design company, and we've been around for about 10 years. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting, And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm social media. I'm learning all about social media and how to use that to grow audiences and whatever else." And then he said to me, "Could you come and do that and consult with some of my clients?" And so I said, jumped in and said, "Yeah, happy to do that, mate." And so we set up a meeting, and had a couple of coffees together, and it felt right. And he said, "All right, I'm going to bring the first client to you, and let's see how we go." And that kind of kicked off my career in marketing.
That's awesome. So what I'm hearing from that, though, is even someone who is shy, someone who is not a big people person and doesn't want to be in the center of attention, luck happens to people who make it happen for themselves. So you put yourself on that cruise, you put yourself in a situation where you could meet people, you could network, like the opportunities were around you, and you weren't afraid to at least strike up a conversation. Sometimes, people expect, look, I'll just wait for something to happen. Things don't just happen. Like you've almost got to make the most of your time wherever you are, or even if it's a limited circumstance, like try to put yourself in the limelight a little bit, or get known, or talk to people, ask questions like what you said. One of the first questions you asked was, "What do you do?" Rather than, "This is me, this is what I do." Like, what do you do? Like, ask the other person. It opens up doors really quickly. So I love what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it was really. I'm just going back. I'm feeling goosebumps even talking about it, because I just remember the emotion of being there. And the thing with a networking event, you can show up, and if you don't like it, within 5 minutes you can leave. That's but right. When you're on a cruise, you're on a boat in a harbour, and I'm not a good swimmer, so I'm not going to go swim anywhere. So that was
meant to make some friends in case you need them to save you.
That's right. So that worked out, and so I was now consulting, moonlighting as a social media consultant whilst I was still in Toronto, building up my expertise and getting runs on the board with the social enterprise that I was volunteering with, and then we got to 2012 or 2011 was sort of the end of my time in Toronto. No, it was actually 2009. My mother passed away and due to cancer. Right. And I had this very strong pull to go to Laos, which is the country that I was born in, and I'd never been there before. We came to Australia in 1979 when I was 6 months old, and now I was 30 odd years old, and I had this real compelling pull to go to my country of origin after my mother passed away.
Yeah.
And so and it so happened that I couldn't renew my visa. I tried to stay in Canada, but it just, for whatever, I couldn't meet the requirements. And so I booked my flight to Laos, and I went and volunteered over there for a good 12 months. I wanted to work in education. I wanted to do some work with this school. I was introduced to a school in Vientiane, which is the capital city. It's called the Sunshine School. And it was funny because I rocked up to this school, and I said I met the director of the school, and she said to me, "So why do you want to volunteer? And why do you want to volunteer with kids?" And I said, "Do you have any formal education training? Have you worked with kids before?" And I said, "No, I train adults. I run workshops for adults, and I teach concepts and things more in the business world. But I just have this desire to connect and do something here and do something good." And so, and she had moments of pause, and then said, "All right, come back tomorrow, and I'm going to show you a few things, and let's have you volunteer here for a month." And that led to a 12-month engagement. I ended up installing the computer lab in the school and connecting them to the internet. They didn't have that before, and then I became the computer teacher and teaching these kids. Now you got to keep in mind, most of these kids didn't speak English.
Yes.
And my spoken Lao is okay, but I some of the 6-year-olds will put me to shame.
Yeah.
And so, but I learned all about, education is more than just the words. There's whole range of things you can teach kids and adults in many ways. And the beautiful thing was I had the experience of then implementing a project called Design for Change. So whilst I was there, I came across a TED talk by this woman, amazing woman in India, by the name of Kiran Biersetti. I'm probably saying her name wrong, but she created this program called Design for Change, and basically what it is, it's bringing a core belief, which is the belief I can, to students and teachers, and it's basically teaching kids that when they believe in their ideas and that they believe that they can make a difference, and they have the support of their elders, and know how to ask for that support, then amazing things are possible within their communities. And so I essentially built a volunteer workforce of 5 volunteers. We were all teachers. The others were all actual teachers getting paid to teach in their schools, and locals. And I was the crazy volunteer from Australia, driving this project. And it ended up being 2 years. You ran for 2 years. We worked with 9 schools, 200 kids, and they went out and implemented these amazing community projects.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, and it was just wow, what a time, right? And that kind of I utilized these skills that I had developed in corporate and also in marketing and whatever else, to that all came down to my ability to use those skills in this non-profit environment, in a really social cause giving environment, and that really brought back to me a real sense of worth and a real sense of purpose, and it made me realize, if I can do this with these schools, I can go back and make a big impact in other ways and maybe some other types of organizations. And so that led to me coming back to Australia in 2011, and back to Sydney. I ended up starting my first official business in Australia, with a co-founder or a business partner, and it was actually a Facebook ad agency. And he was a technician, so he was the guy who knew all the things, how to do the campaigns, how to set it up in Facebook, and I was the guy who would go out and sell the vision and really help small businesses with the strategy. So before you launch into ads, you need to understand why you're doing it and what are the objectives and what are you trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Wow. So it's interesting your journey, because while you might have been doing any one of those things, you might not have been able to see forward in time to go, working as a volunteer for a school overseas in Laos is going to give me the skills that you needed to, be able to then do something entrepreneurially yourself when you then went to Sydney and started up your first business, or, the stuff that you had from corporate, you took out all. Seems like what you've done, Anfernee, is take out the best out of everything you've ever done and bring it forward in what you're doing today. But looking back in hindsight, you can connect the dots. But when you're going through that at the time, everything would have been challenging. Everything would have been, why am I doing this? This has nothing to do with what I studied at uni, or this has nothing to do with, with what my background is, or, but now looking back, you can almost clearly connect the dots, can't you? Like everything has led you to a certain point.
100%, Gavin. And one of the things I'm kind of proud of, and I hang my hat on, during this time, is I actually say to people who are looking to get into marketing, I say, look, you don't need a degree. Like I grew up in that, the family mindset and that tradition of, hey, you got to go to university, you got to study, you got to get the good grades, you got to get the degree. And I'm living proof that I didn't study formally in marketing. Like it actually is that my passion for psychology and human behavior and how we communicate with each other effectively. These skills were developed during my time in corporate and during my time in university.
Yep.
And also outside of the work environment, right? So by traveling and meeting people overseas in different countries and going on adventures and whatnot, that's how you learn, and how I learned about what actually drives humans. And to me, we all have a message, we all have a dream or a vision. We're all trying to do something good in the world for ourselves or our families or our communities. And marketing to me really is just an expression of that. It's, are you able to articulate, right, your purpose in a way that it resonates with the people you're trying to support? Because if they don't get it, then you're going to fail. Right, and it's not because you don't have the skills necessarily. It's more so that you're not expressing it right, or you're not showing up in the right places where they can hear it, where they can hear the message, And so you're right. In reflection, in hindsight, all my work and my career has been about teaching, and my wife and I talk about this often. Is I assume you're familiar with the UN Global Goals, Gavin?
Yes.
Yeah, so when I looked at those global goals, straight away I knew, for me, my number one is education, which is goal number 4. And it's always been about teaching. For me, it's how can I take these things that I'm learning and condense it and simplify it and teach it to others so they can get it, right? Because, in the world of IT, things can be very technical, right? In the world of marketing, things can be very technical very quickly. And so... Yeah, and so it's more like people come to me and they say things like, I'm just not confident setting up a web page. I don't know how to do that. I don't want to learn necessarily all the technology. Just can you teach me how to do that? And I say, yeah, or how do I set up a Facebook page? How does that work, right? What's a YouTube, and things like this. And it's like, okay, let's try and simplify it. And that's why I do workshops and I do a lot of teaching through video, because I think that's a really strong format for people to learn. And that's how I arrive at today, where I basically focus on 2 things. I focus on strategy, which is let's put together the game plan for where you're trying to get to with your business. And then the other part of it is the actual content itself. So I have a team of writers, and we write articles and we write content and we produce case studies for our clients. So we basically help them spread the message about what they do better.
I really like that. I mean, when you told me on our previous chat, what it is exactly you do, because I see you've done so many different things. I mean, you're really, really multi-skilled, multi-talented. You've got experience in lots and lots of different areas. Really, your best experience is just real-world, experience. You've been not only in the trenches in corporate, but you've been out in the real world. You've been across multiple countries. You have dealt with people from all kinds of backgrounds. You've done volunteer work. You've done paid work. You've worked with founders. You've done, you have a really unique perspective, Anfernee, on seeing lots and lots of different, where people are trying to make a difference, and then your skill, or one of your very many skills, is being able to then help them articulate their story to their audiences. And then by doing that, you're helping, them just do what they're good at, but you're helping enable that, and get their message out to more people, which I think is fantastic. Because a lot of people struggle with that part.
Absolutely, thanks, mate. I struggle with for myself sometimes, and It's really understanding. I don't know you do that for your programs, is to help people to understand, well, what is your expertise, where is your credibility, right? Because if you're trying to go out there and sell something to somebody, the first question that's going to come up is going to be, well, what's your backstory? What's your experience and expertise? And can I trust you, right? And that trust conversation comes up. Now, fortunately, we're at a time where we do have the ability to, they call it Google stalk or Facebook stalk, where you can go online and you can search someone and look up their profile on LinkedIn and look up at their website and things.
Yes.
So we need to pay attention to that. If you're operating in 2020 and beyond, people do. And recruiters do this when people go for jobs. They literally Google your name, right? And they're looking for what comes up and what can we learn about this person that's trying to apply to this company, right? And clients do that. Clients are going, okay, you're saying you can produce a result for me. Let me check out your website. Let me check out your customer stories. Let me check out other suppliers who are your competitors, and let me see which one resonates best with me, right?
Yeah, and also, I know people look at other things as well. They might look at your Facebook or LinkedIn profile. They might. So, again, if you're out there trying to establish a name for yourself or build a credibility for your business, and you've got this Instagram page that shows you, getting drunk at bars and you might think, well, that's just my fun thing that I did back in my 20s. But you've got all these pictures around, and you've got all these things that paint. Remember they position you in a different light to other people who now have access to this information. You've just got to be wary of what it is you're putting out there. Is it all aligned to where you are now? And, if you're trying to get something done today, like, is everything in alignment, or are you confusing the marketplace with who you really are? And I think you raise a really good point with that.
Yeah. And, one comment or quote that comes to mind is, what goes on Google or what goes on the internet tends to stay on the internet. Yeah. So, so even if you try and delete the photos from Facebook, it's going to appear somewhere. Someone's got it, or even the Google and Facebook and the companies themselves, they store that data on their servers. So, even though you think it's gone and you can't see it, it's still there, right? So you got to be careful about. You're absolutely right. What you put on there is you got to pay attention to, I guess, the narrative, the story that you choose to put out there. Because if you're not consciously controlling the narrative, right, Google will, right? The people who are going in and looking at it, they will form their own impressions.
Yeah. And you can't be complacent about this stuff. See, back in maybe 15, 20 years ago, it's like, you want to know all about me? Here's my resume. Here's a document that tells you everything you could possibly find out about me. Today, without that document, I can find out a lot about you. And it's a different world. Now, for people who have, who are still in corporate or working in their jobs and they're looking to find a way out, right now, they may or may not be consciously thinking of these things. But once you go out into the real world and start your business, it doesn't matter how high you are in the corporate ladder. To start a business, you've got to come down that corporate ladder, and you've got to climb up a new ladder, and you've got to start from step number one. And it doesn't matter how many letters after your name, how many degrees you've got, how much experience, how many teams you've managed in the past. All that doesn't mean a thing when you start your own business, because when you start your own business, you've got to earn that trust all over again. It's like starting from scratch, and it's a really humbling experience. And you just want to make sure you put everything in your favor that's going to help you. So you got to clean up your backyard, make sure things that are online, offline, all that sort of stuff. You want to start getting control of these things. And I guess, Anfernee, you're a good person in terms of helping people share their stories. But just understanding your backstory. How is it going to position you? How you got to think about it. Think about your why, your vision. I mean, these are really important things. It's not just the technical aspect of what you're going to do for your business or the product or service. People will buy from you if they trust you and they like you. I mean, ultimately.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I would add to that they will buy from you even if they don't like you 100%, because there's some inherent differences between your personalities. But if they respect you, right, more than they respect your competitors, then they're still going to buy from you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, even if there's things that are not favorable out there or things that, you might have done in the past, the thing is, rather than hide from it, you're upfront. Your transparency today is probably, I would say, one of the biggest things. You know, you really can't hide from the truth anymore. You could back in the day, but you can't anymore. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people that I see setting up businesses and saying one thing, but they do the other. And you very quickly find out who's who in the zoo. And, you know, like whenever I do business, Anfernee, with anyone, I just want to work with people, one, that I can trust beyond anything. I don't really have to like them. Like, you're right, I don't totally have to like them 100%, but I really want to trust them. And with the amount of competition that's out there, especially online today, earning trust is one of the hardest things. So getting your story right, like the stuff that you're doing is probably so important compared to a lot of other stuff that I see going on, because getting your story correct, getting the facts out there, positioning yourself, critical, absolutely critical.
Yeah, there's a really good example of just what can go wrong with what we call a personal brand, which really just means your reputation. Yeah. And you know, I'm sure you've come across the Pete Evans story recently. So he basically celebrity food chef guy, big following. You know, he was on one of those shows on TV, and yeah, that's right. And you know, he started doing anti-face mask posts on social media a while back, and then he was doing like commenting on neo-Nazi symbolism and things like this, and so now he's just been let go by all his partners, which you know equate to millions of dollars worth of revenue and sure income for him and his family. So you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, no, totally. So, you know, obviously, for people that are watching this, Anfernee, they're you know, people that are thinking, gee, can I do this? Is this a good time for me to even be starting a business with all the changes that are going on in the economy, in the world? Should I just sit back in my job and be, you know, just ride this period out? Or, you know, what would you say to people like that are, one, that they're already feeling uneasy in their job? They don't know what next year's going to bring. And they're seeing people around them either lose their job, being made redundant, have their hours cut back, all that sort of stuff, the usual stuff. But they're also hesitant in terms of, you know, taking that first step into business. Like, what words of either encouragement or, you know, is there light at the end of the tunnel for people? Like, how would you, you know, what would you say to them?
That's a great question, Gavin. And I think that my first immediate reaction to that is there is no better time. If that's something you're considering, there is no better time to start than yesterday. And if you're in it now is such a great time, because look at what's happening. People are literally forced to stay at home and work from home. We are in a situation where, because of lockdowns, depending on where you are, you are in the confines of your own personal space, and therefore you have more time. So we're not doing the go out and social network every Wednesday night and meet each other at the pub and do these things. That rarely exists right now. And so what happens is, what people are doing is they're taking the opportunity to learn, to upskill, to investigate, to explore, to reassess, to evaluate, you know, literally just sit down for an hour or half an hour at your favorite cafe or on your balcony, you know, one morning or whatever it is for you, and just think about, answer a few real simple questions like, you know, what do I care about? Yeah. What's important to me, right? What kind of work, if I had a choice of my ideal work location or work day, what would that look like? All right. And you know, who are the customers that I would work with? What expertise can I bring to the equation, and what challenges and problems can I solve for people? Right. So I'm sure these are the questions that I'm sure you're asking your clients as they go through your programs. And this is the time to do it. Take stock, talk to, and something I did and I continually do is I actually go to the people who know me best, and I actually say to them, what do you think I do great or that I do well? Right? Simon Sinek, who wrote Start With Why, and he wrote a couple of other books, but he does the exercise that he does, recommends, which is, you know, call up, you know, 5 or 10 of your best mates, people who have known you for a while, and just say, why are you friends with me?
Yeah.
Right? And then they're going to say, oh, because you're great, Gavin. But then you want to dig deeper. Like then you ask the next question is, yeah, but specifically, why me? Mm-hmm. Right? Because then now this might feel weird and awkward, and it probably, you know, it does, but what you want to get to is people will then say things to you that, like, it makes them to really consider, okay, oh, it's because of this thing, or it's because you shop in this way for me, or you genuinely care about other people, or whatever it may be. That's some real gold feedback, right? Like that's kind of stuff that, when in the work that I do with small business owners and small businesses, I force them to go back to their clients and and actually ask these questions. I say, why do you buy from us? Why do you keep buying from us? Why do you continue to come back to our cafe every day to get coffee here when there's another guy down the street who's $1 cheaper, whatever it may be, right? So there's real reasons why people show up for you and why they keep coming back to you, and that's the thing that you need to understand, okay? And when you do that customer research, you can really clarify that. Now, if you're in a situation where you haven't launched the business yet, you haven't started that, the most important thing you can do over the next 3 to 6 months, whatever it is actually talk to people who fit the profile of your potential customer, right? And just get on a call with them, hey, 30 minutes or 10 minutes of your time, I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions. I'm exploring starting a business or creating a course or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I just love some feedback. I'm not trying to sell anything to you. I just want some information from you and see, because you've got experience here and I want to know, and that's valuable.
See, that's brilliant. I mean, and people want to help other people. That's one thing I learned, over time is if you ask people for help, they want to help you. People don't necessarily want to be sold, but people are really willing to give people help and advice and things like that. And you'd be surprised, just doing exactly what you just suggested, Anfernee, can reveal a lot of gold nuggets, sometimes from your own community, from your own friends, people you've worked with, past clients, prospects. And that will help give you clarity, because we are our own worst critic. So we always think we're not good at this, we're not good at that, we're only good at certain things. But until you get the perspective from other people, that's your social proof. That's all the evidence you need on which areas you might want to focus on in the future. So I think that's amazing advice that you could share with our audience, because there's a lot of people who probably haven't ever done that. And now they might go, you know what, I'm going to put a survey together. I'm going to ask a few questions. You lose absolutely nothing.
No, and you learn, and it's really, if you take the approach of it's I'm just learning and growing, and I'm just talking to humans. And look, we're all craving connection right now. What better way than to connect with someone and just say, look, I just love to talk and learn more about you as a human being, right? And that's really what it is. I'll add a couple of other ideas, for that person who's thinking about it.
Yeah.
The second one I'd say is really to start working on your profile. And what I mean by that is have a think about where you want to be 12 months from now, right? What do you want to be known for? Okay, what are you, if Gavin and I were at dinner one day and we're like having a conversation and something comes up that you do, what is that thing that you do and that we both, one of us knows that you do it, right? Because then if I say to Gavin, hey, I need help with this, and he goes, oh, I've got this mate who does exactly that, because he saw it on your LinkedIn profile or he saw it on your website or something like that, because you have a podcast, then that's immediate referral, okay? And that only happens because you've intentionally defined, this is where I want to be, and this is I'm putting it out there, letting people know that that's who I am, that's how I help people, right? And I mentioned my story was I started blogging in 2009, and it was only because I started blogging in 2009 and did it for 2 years before one of my someone in my network, one of my friends who volunteered with me at the nonprofit in Canada, she said, hey, I'm writing for the Huffington Post, and the editor is actually looking for people who are based in Australia or in the Asia Pacific region to write about leadership and whatever it is, and I've seen your writing and I think you'd be great for this. You want me to connect you with my editor? And that's how I landed my gig as a contributor to Huffington Post, right? But only because I took the time to just write my thoughts down on this blog that I thought no one was paying attention to, but she was, right? So that's for tip number 2, if you will. And then the third one I would say is focus on, in relation to profile, is focus on results. So do experiments. So if you want to be, like in my case, if you want to get into the world of marketing, right? When we interview, so I've worked on the other side of things where I've actually helped companies to recruit people coming into the marketing departments. And what we look for beyond anything, yes, they're going to give us the resume, but what we're looking for is evidence that they've actually done the work that their resume says they've done. So we actually say, okay, show me your portfolio. Show me, you say you can do Facebook ads. Show me a campaign that you've actually run where you've put in a budget and you've generated a good return from that budget, right? If you claim that you've written articles and you've written about personal finance, send us a link to your blog. We want to see the articles. What have you written? What have you shared? Like people want to see proof that you've done the things that you've said you've done, right? And so LinkedIn is a huge one, and I think a lot of people are missing the boat by not putting out content on LinkedIn on a regular basis, because it is a professional network. It is a place where recruiters look. It's a place where potential employers will look and potential team members and managers are looking, right? So, whether you want to stay in corporate and change your role or change your organization or jump to entrepreneurship, you want to start now and start writing about your theories and philosophies and ideas around your industry, right? Just get into the habit of doing that, once a week, once a month. I'd say go for weekly. Monthly is too long. If you're only posting an update once a month, it's not really visible because of the algorithms and things. But for me, I had a mate who he wanted to get into the world of fintech. And so what he did was he actually launched a podcast, and he's a community manager. We met together when we worked as community managers for Hub Australia, which is a co-working community here in Sydney and Melbourne. And what he did was very intelligent. He basically started a podcast, and he started interviewing all these leaders in corporate, in community management, right? So these people who were HR managers, people who had a had a focus on building communities within their organizations and improving the morale of their team members and whatnot, and the productivity levels. So guess what he did? He interviewed all these hiring managers and CEOs and people who had interest in improving productivity levels of their staff, and then he essentially did that for 12 months. And whilst he was interviewing them, he would go back to them and say, hey, I'm actually looking for a role in community management for a financial tech company. And he landed a role he came down to 3 different companies, and he got the one he wanted, and a great salary and all of that. But
because he went out of his way to, first he offered them a benefit or a service, and like showed that, hey, let me do something for you. And did that, and then as a way of return, the universe works in strange ways, Anfernee. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that happened, because he went out on a limb to do something for other people, and then it came back, And so
yeah, absolutely,
I see that all the time. I think I love the tips. Did you have anything else you wanted to share? Or those were amazing tips. Like I'm making some notes over here, and I know people are as well. But
I'll add to just that last comment about building a platform for yourself. So whether it's a podcast, a blog, a YouTube channel, even just a simple newsletter that you send out once a month or a weekly basis. The next part goes to networking, building your network. Okay, so the assets that you can build to control your own, I guess, narrative are one, a profile. So you control that narrative. Then you also control your network. So one common challenge I see, and one I struggled with when I left corporate, was, here I was, all my network were people who worked in that company, in that space, right? So, here I am going from IT, and I'm trying to transition into marketing, which is a different industry, right, and a different department, right? So what I had to learn to do, and also then I was shifting into entrepreneurship, which meant I needed to change my network. I needed to be surrounded by entrepreneurs and suppliers and people who would actually help me build business, right, and that I could help them. And so one thing you need to be deliberate about is building the right network around you for where you want to be in the next 12 months. Okay, so if you are, if you're in, like, finance is your thing, that's the industry that you're in, but you're trying to get into coaching like Gavin or whatever it may be, then you want to start surrounding yourselves with those type of people. So it means you can use, LinkedIn as a way to connect to other coaches or people in specific industries that you want to get into, and start jumping on Zoom calls, or when we can meet up again, have coffees and meet people in person. But the best way to network, in my experience, Gavin, is to actually do a podcast like what you're doing right now, right? Because you literally have the person for half an hour or an hour. You're learning all about them, and they learn a bit about you, and then after, and then you're building a relationship. And that's the best way, and you're adding value to them, because you're saying, I'm going to put you in front of my audience, and I'm going to highlight what you do, right? And that's much more powerful than what's happened. I've seen people do this to me, and I used to do it. I'm almost ashamed to say when I started, I'm tapping people on the shoulder and saying, hey, Gavin, I'd love to pick your brain. for half an hour or an hour. And you've got to realize these people, like they've got a business because they're busy and they're trying to make, they're trying to make a wage to pay their families and all these other things. Yeah. So an hour of their time, they're literally getting paid to consult for those hours. So you have to think about what's the contribution back. How are you giving back to that person, right?
Mm-hmm. No, very good. Very awesome tips. Really. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Anfernee. So, man, I'm looking at the time and I could talk to you all day about this sort of stuff, but I am conscious and what I want to do is really like, as we're getting to the tail end of this, I want to get into another segment, which only literally goes for like 2 or 3 minutes, but it's kind of, I do this with all my guests and it's called a rapid response section. I've got five quick questions for you, and whatever comes to your mind first off the rank, just yell it out. And there's no right or wrong; it doesn't really matter. It's just a bit of fun. You happy to go ahead with that?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Cool. So, what is your favorite mode of learning?
I'd say seminars first, so workshops in a room with people where we can bounce up and down and high five. That's probably the favorite mode of learning.
Okay, awesome. Now, do you have a favorite role model or a hero or someone that you just look up to? It can be anyone. You can have more than one. That's fine.
I have a few. I'll say, so Bruce Lee comes to mind. So the first Asian superhero to break into martial arts on TV all over the world and movies. And then I've got Michael Jordan. So I used to play basketball and that he's always been someone that I looked up to. More recently, LeBron James because of the work he does. He's like Michael Jordan 2.0 because he's doing what MJ did, but more social impact driven. And then I also have very close to home, my mother, my auntie, and my grandmother. So the three women who've taught me about generosity, about caring for others, and about caring. And then I add a fourth, which is my wife, because she's taught me all about family.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for that. That's great. What about a favorite quote or something that you resonates with you, or a book or something that you might refer to other people, something like that you could share with us?
The first one that comes to mind is procrastination is the thief of time.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. Good one. Wonderful. What about a cause or a charity that you support? And I know you've done a lot of volunteer work here and there, so you probably have multiple of these. But is there one that you want to call out or share with our audience so they might be able to look them up?
So if there's one I've supported in Laos, which is called Big Brother Mouse, and they're a non-profit, and they basically their mission is to provide education to all the kids and students who don't have access to books, and so they print books and they go out and deliver them to the rural villages. And I've actually been on one of their trips a few years ago. So Big Brother Mouse, check those guys out. And another one I do contribute to a lot is kiva.org. So kiva.com, which is a platform for you to basically lend money to entrepreneurs, micro entrepreneurs all over the world. Okay,
fantastic. So I'll get the links off you for both of those places, and we'll, when we put the podcast out, we'll definitely share the links after that as well, so people can go and visit those. And finally, I was going to say something quirky about you that not many people know, but now you've let the cat out of the bag. You're a salsa teacher. What else do we need to know about Anfernee that maybe a lot of people don't know?
Let me think about that. It's probably a question for my wife. What's quirky about me? So, I think what I shared earlier, I'm more introverted than people think.
Yeah.
Because I do show up and I love to do public speaking and these sort of things. I also love being on my own and sort of in smaller spaces. I'd now prefer to be in small groups rather than large, like, concert hall filled with people. I'd rather have small dinners, and that's kind of my thing right now.
No, that's totally cool, man. That's awesome. So, hey, Anfernee, tell us how people can get in touch with you with your business at the moment. If someone listening to this goes, hey, this sounds like Anfernee sounds like a good guy I just want to connect with, and obviously there's ways to connect with you. What are the best ways for people to connect with you?
Yeah, cool. So I have I've actually got a case study guide that I put together, which would be helpful for anyone who's wanting to learn how to better share the stories, the customer success stories for their business. So they can just head over to simplecreativemarketing.com/case study guide, and you can just go grab that there, and you can find all the links to the socials and things like that on there.
Wonderful. That's nice and easy. So I'll put all these links out, obviously, once we publish your podcast and all that. But Anfernee, thank you, man, for spending, a good amount of time today with us and just sharing your journey. A lot of personal stuff in there and going down memory lane, but, really sharing all the trials and tribulations and how you've come through this journey. I think this is the stuff that actually resonates with people that are listening, because they're right now going through the journey. And so it's really good to see that, if you never give up, like my karate instructor says, a black belt, is someone who started off as a white belt. If you never give up and you stay on the path and you're just constantly looking to improve and make a difference, you will get there in the end. And obviously all the tips that Anfernee shared will help you get there faster. So thank you for being on the show, and thanks for giving us your time.
Hey, thanks, Gavin. I really appreciate you and the space you're creating just to help people to break free from the matrix.
Thanks, buddy. If you like this podcast and would like to understand a little bit more about what was just discussed, then you're in luck. Simply head over to breakfreefromcorporate.com and we have a fantastic bonus gift waiting for you to download. All we ask in return is that you leave us a review on iTunes and or Stitcher, whichever you use. And lastly, help us share this podcast around with your friends, your colleagues through Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or LinkedIn. We truly appreciate all your support, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode of Break Free from Corporate. Once again, to access previous and all future episodes, visit breakfreefromcorporate.com and subscribe today.